Hopefully this screen is viewable now. Thank you for inviting me. And good morning, everyone, and welcome to the presentation. So my name is Chris, as Brendan said, and although I've worked for 8 years in the industry, this is actually my first public presentation. I'm very excited, and I hope it won't be my last. I'll dive now into live ops and why maybe, just maybe, we were born to run. It all started with running. In this case, and yes, there's going to be a lot of these bad jokes on run, be prepared. It started with running, in this case, running a new live ops. This is a very common point we all face sooner and later in free-to-play. So we need to create something, we need to put something new into our game. And first off, it's about what to run. That means that for me, you need to understand product motivations. So what we refer to by product motivations is essentially understand what is working inside of the game beyond preconceived ideas. Now, the moment where we're talking about these product motivations, so is when you're trying to define what to run in your game. What should you put that is new? You have the usual way that we're doing this is that you have a feature backlog, you do a lot of brainstorming, benchmarking, etc., and then you need to prioritize. And what happens usually is that when you're benchmarking other games on the market, you tend to be also driven by preconceived ideas. And one of the reasons why we wanted to try to define these product motivations is to move beyond preconceived ideas. And I'll try to explain a little bit what that means in terms of competitors. The way I like to think about product motivations is like this. We have 6 core product motivations. Well, in reality 7, but one of them is specifically for casinos, so I won't be going into that today. We developed this kind of methodology here in Gameloft, and what you first have is, for example, you're going to have games that are collection games of the amazing Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes or our own Disney Magic Kingdoms or My Little Pony. Then you're going to have games that are about pure creation. So to my mind, that's just Roblox and Minecraft, and really we couldn't put them in any other category. Your goal here is to simply build in the game whatever you want, because you have all the tools to do so. Then you have crafting-based games, so Heyday or My Cafe, which are based around making ingredients, optimizing perfectly so that you have that chain of production that is beautiful and that is optimal. And then on the flip side of that, you'd have highly competitive games, so things like Fortnite or 4X games, Rise of Kingdoms, or our own March of Empires. You have games that are focused on pure growth, so they're not driven by a story or by really a specific goal beyond simply grow in power. So a lot of MMOs actually are like that, so like Lineage or sandbox games, and in this case I took the example of our own Gangster. And finally, progression-based games. So here it's either games that are driven by story or by imminent goals, so narrative games like Choices, or a runner game like Million Rush, which is basically mission-based, and obviously the ever-popular Candy Crush. I mean, who can say that saga map is not a perfect example of progression? And if you look below the surface, like thinking like this will enable you to think differently and perhaps identify better competitors. And I'll take a couple of examples. And so here, if you compare Township and Klondike, or Klondike, as one of my favorite Spanish colleagues was always saying, you have on one side Township, which is a game which is really about crafting this optimization that I talked about before. And then you have Klondike on the other side, which is a game which actually is about progressing in the story, whereas the part with the tycoon is essentially, let's say, an excuse. So these games would not be directly comparable if you're thinking about the motivation, and potentially the features that you want to apply. Now, similarly, and this is a way that we have of thinking of the games, is that we're thinking, okay, they look really similar, so probably they're direct competitors. Now, sometimes that's true, and sometimes it's not. So if we take this example of the amazing Covet Fashion and Love Nick, You Dressed Up Queen. Now, Covet Fashion is a game which actually is deeply driven by competition. It's all about voting. events where you're being ranked, and and you have a score in the middle, right? You have this score out of 5 stars, and your goal is to get to that. Like, that's about as competitive as you can get versus the rest of the people in the game. Whereas a game like Love Nikki is a game which is deeply collection driven. It has all the rules of a normal RPG. It features a lot of clothes that you can craft together, that you can evolve. It has rarities, it has gacha. So it's really a collection game at the core. And once again, the features from one of these games are probably not directly applicable to the other. And to answer the burning question that you no doubt have at this point, yes, it also works with cars. So if you think about a game like CSR2, that's a collection-driven game. It's a drag racing game where you have very little skill involved. So it's all about choosing the right car, evolving that car. Whereas our own Asphalt 9 Legends is actually a competition-based game. It has a lot of skills. It's an arcade type racer. And although they both have cars, again, the feature sets from one don't necessarily apply to the other. In a game like Asphalt 9, again, you have a lot of skill and you're really focused on synchronous multiplayer, whereas this is not the case in CSR2. So the point about this is to think carefully about your references, because the cars are just not enough to make a difference. And if you take this all the way, a better reference for Asphalt, which is a competitive game, might just be Fortnite. If you take this route, then you'll be looking at the features of Fortnite as potentially a fit for a game like Asphalt 9. And recently, the massive success that we've had with the introduction of the Battle Pass, right, very common feature, a lot of people have tried it, but in Asphalt 9, it works particularly well. And one of the reasons, to my mind, why this is the case is because both of these games are at the core competitive games. And that means that the core drivers would be the same, and the feature applies well to this audience. So at this point, we got the feature, and who do you run these features for once you've done this selection? Well, that is actually quite simple. You run your live ops for all types of players, not some, all of them. And the whole trick is having an offering of live ops which is actually valid for your whole set of players. So, for example, what that means is that first, for example, you're going to be targeting by level of spend. So if you take up just a live ops, an imaginary live ops calendar in this case, let's have offers that are targeting early conversions, so lower price points, reconversions with some purchasing limits. Then you can target your whales with higher priced packs that are not necessarily capped, but have a lot of very interesting content for them. So basically, what you're expecting is that users are essentially going to self-segment across the offers that you're going to be offering to them. And similarly, if you're thinking about a hard currency offer, here you're going to want to have content which enables people to sync because they tend to hoard this hard currency over time. So you need to provide content for sync, like typically gachas in this case, as the example I'm taking. And then you can have things like focusing on promotions for this hard currency, etc. So there's a lot of techniques you can do. And then you need to think about simple player preferences. So here, do your players prefer to play solo? Do they prefer PvE? Do they prefer PvP? So in this case, you could offer different types of events. Let's say you have players who like to play on their own, and they're not necessarily competitive players. So then you can have features tailored to this. You can also have players who like to play in a guild, but don't necessarily are not competitive players. So you could have raid events for them. And again, if you have guild players that are very competitive, you could have guild wars offered. So all of this, you really need to keep in mind all the possible distributions of users that you have in your game, and you need to think about giving an offering for all of them. Because again, we're in the business of entertainment. What we need is to provide fun in something that is relevant for people. And as much as I don't like using the word fun here, it actually applies. And finally, let's not forget about the users that are non-paying. And here you can actually offer pure entertainment features, things centered around daily login, easier events that target wide, or ads. If you take it into this case, you could have a raid, for example, and part of that energy being given in video ads. Immediately, you've given a possibility for your non-paying users to engage with your content the same, and that potentially they would also be as engaged as some of your paying users. So you can't forget about any of these categories. Recapping, this means that you're mainly going to be splitting your plan for by spending profile, by advancement in the game, and by type of feature, as I said, like preferences for solo or competitive. And in parallel to this, we have a nice busy slide, which is about your content strategy. You need to have a content strategy. Obviously, you don't have an infinite possibility of creating content. If you do, awesome for you. Most people don't. And here, that means you need to basically have a rollout. Immediately taking your content and putting it into the shop is going to be less optimal. So, for example, here, what you could do is go first from a type of premium live ops, so player focused, quite competitive, difficult, and with some exclusive content. And then later take some of the less exclusive content, move it into bundles a month later. 2 months after that, moving into high engagement live ops, or targeting very engaged players, but not necessarily payers that require requires a lot of gameplay. 2 months after that, you could put it into more wide-reaching live ops, or for earlier players in the game, you could use discounts on top of your bundles. And finally, after maybe 3 months, you could put this into the shop. The idea is that the earlier the investment into your new content, your very exclusive content, the most valuable, the more expensive it is, but the most satisfying for the user. And you need to make it that way. You need to essentially extend the lifetime and value of your content by applying this type of technique on top, because you simply don't have the liberty of producing everything and just flooding your game with content. You need to have a certain value proposition that you're applying to it. And finally, now that we have the feature, we have placed it in our live ops strategy, that means we need to run it, literally run it this time, right? And how do we do that? Well, we do it through tools. And I'll insist on non-dev friendly tools. And that's kind of going to be my creed here, that you're targeting the mere mortals and not the devs with your tools. That means that a tool needs to have simple layout, silly things like easy naming or flexible targeting. Very important that it should be server-side focused. And because you need to empower your live ops team to change and test fast without having to necessarily rely on the rest of the team or doing other things that we'll come to. So this tool could look something as simple as this, just a big list of actions in order. Remember that you're going to be doing hundreds of campaigns in a given week, and that should be easy to do for your live ops team. They should be almost not looking forward to it, but it should be simple for them to start creating content. And if they need to change it on the fly. If they need to run an A/B test, well, do it now rather than do it in the next update, because you need somebody to implement something in the client. That's the idea of non-dev friendly tools. The tools need to be friendly to non-tech people. And what the tool should do, well, really the basics. Should be able to plan. So set up promotional plans, set them up in advance. This sounds silly, but how many times did you actually have to activate something right now, and then you have to be there on Friday evening so that it actually works, right? Allow a lot of recurrence option, automate what you can. Targets. So here you need to have intelligible parameters. So for example, call something total spent of a player, not profile has spent whatever it is. It needs to be understandable for the people using it and easy to go with low amounts of mistakes. And you need to be able to simply target for A/B testing. So here you have your segment, right? And the end, you define. So what is the content? You can set up limits for obvious mistakes. You need to be able to do bulk entry for large games when you have a lot of content to manage. And simply here, you just have the name of an item, you have a quantity, you have a price, you want to run a discount. That should be extremely trivial. So again, this is really the basics, but you want your tool to be able to do this out of the box with no problem, no doubts whatsoever. It should not be more difficult than that to set up a promotion or event, even in the example I'm taking here, in a 7-year-old game. So this is examples taken directly from Asphalt. And that's because your devs are busy creating new live ops. What is important when you're going to be creating new live ops? Variations. It's not about modifying the core gameplay so much as it is as presenting something new, something that feels simply fresh, mix and matching mechanics. And this is also a very good way to market your game at the end of the day. So some examples that I'm going to take here. This is an example from Mass Effect 9, which was the Blue Rabbit marketing event, which we used for an event called the Drive Syndicate. We made it look as though the game was hacked. And so it was the Blue Rabbit communicating on top, and this got the community actually very engaged. And some of them actually believed that our game had been hacked, and that meant that at the end of the day, you had an event that not just was new, but also felt special in the way that it had been presented. And then let's take oldie but goodie from Fate Grand Order. So if you take a nice magical girl event, this is a recent one that they rerun. It's the same core, right? But you have a new progression on a new map that looks with a magical girl theme. You have boss fights. So at the end of the day, you have something which feels different, even though it's using essentially the same core gameplay at the base. So you just built on top of what exists. You don't lose your players, but you make something that feels different. And again, remember, business of entertainment, so people want to play this. And if you're wondering, I can really assure you that mega events work. So this is from our own Disney Magic Kingdom. So this is the Star Wars event that we released at the same time as Episode 9. So again, taking advantage of all the hype that was going around the conclusion of the episodes 7, 8, 9 trilogy. It had a new look, new missions, popular characters, that some of them you can see here. That works. And it's really where you want your dev team to be focusing. You don't want them to have to implement every single small A/B test on their side. That should be done by the tools, and that should be something which is almost independent from the normal process of updates. You want them to be making something that feels fresh and new without losing players. You keep the same base mechanics, but again, fresh and new. And players will engage with it because that's also what they're looking for in this type of game. So it's really all about running, you see, at different levels. You're running the right new features, the ones your players run to. You're running them for the long term, for the marathon in this case, and you're running them without devs who are making the new ones. So really, forget the maybe. We were born to run. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your attention.
Awesome. Hey, thanks, Chris. Great to have you here with us, man. So we definitely got a couple of questions, let's say, for you. Just as we're waiting for like some of the stuff to come up here, let's say on the stream. It sounds like you had a lot of stuff going on in parallel, let's say, all the time, because I guess it never stops. But what's been the one that you really enjoy doing the most? What's been your favorite project so far? Meaning, in terms of, let's say, like, what's been the most challenging? Like, it's not, no, I love Star Wars, so I love, let's say, doing the Magical Kingdom, Baku stuff, right? But what's been the biggest one for you?
I mean, our biggest one is definitely Disney Magic Kingdoms.
Yeah.
It's here currently. It's still the biggest game in Gameloft, and it's been really an amazing ride. Like the team has built with a lot of effort on top of it. And I think the most challenging, though, for us are still our oldest games, because they were built at a time when reality was probably very different.
Yeah.
And so we have a lot of challenges that just relate to, well, now the reality of games is that you have live ops all the time, and we need the games to be adapted to this. So you have games like Despicable Me Million Rush or Asphalt 8, which were both great successes from the Barcelona studio. And that was 2013, right? So these are really challenging projects to still work with, to keep them relevant in the market today. And we've gone through a lot of iterations to make that work out.
Yeah, that's true. You guys got such a big portfolio. I was only playing Modern Combat, let's say, like a little bit ago, and it's still got a pretty big, let's say, player base, right? So, I mean, it's, I don't think that's ever going to die. When's Modern Combat 10 going to come out?
Oh, it's an excellent question. I keep asking the same question, the same one. So we'll keep you posted.
Good stuff. Okay, so a couple from the stream. What are the things, in your opinion, that are undesirable in live ops, but should still keep happening, and then how to try and avoid those? That's a pretty good one.
Indeed, that's also a complicated one. So the things that keep happening, well, one of them is I mentioned, like that you need to rely on a lot of people in the dev team to actually release even simple content. Let's say a pop-up. I mean, that should be done by your server. You should be able to just put an image in there if you need to. So that for me is quite problematic. I also think that to a large degree we've underestimated, what is live ops. Like literally everything that changes inside of the game should be considered live ops. And I think that there's still a divide between, the classic let's build more features in the game and the live ops part, which end up separated. And this almost feels like these are historical reasons. Like, I mean, your game is all about running live ops. If you're, whether you like it or not, once you're live on a free-to-play game, you need to be running live ops. You need to have this keep this content coming. And I think one of the undesirable things is precisely that there's a division between what is the live ops component of the game and what is the feature component of the game. And these are the same thing. These need to work in parallel. Absolutely. Like you want your best designers to be working on new live ops, even on small things, because this is what is going to be engaging the players, and that's what's going to keep. I mean, we're talking numbers, right? That's what's going to keep your DAUs up there, and this is the main challenge for every game on the market right now. We have far too many competitors to allow our games to be idle.
Yeah, and more people playing them then as well, right? It's not only, let's say, the competition, let's say, tougher, but there's more people playing, so it's like it's But that's why you're in the game, because you're very good at what it is, let's say, that you guys are doing. Okay, we've got another one. What is the weak point if new content goes first to the Battle Pass as the presentation to the player, and then only then to the bundles and the shop? Ooh.
Interesting. Yeah. So you have to balance both, right? Your battle pass is balanced against a specific type of difficulty. So we don't tend to put our top content in it because our battle pass is targeted as more of a conversion or as a conversion offer because it's not very expensive, right? So we target it more towards the lower part of the funnel and also for our engaged players. So the idea is not to put our top content there. It's just to put helpful mechanics. So, for example, in the battle pass in Asphalt 9, you have a bonus to your energy, and that's very valuable, whatever type of player you are. So, actually, we've seen that players tend to engage more with this type of mechanic and reward than with the top content, which we put in more difficult events that are more challenging, that require more time. So, the battle pass is about your engagement over time, whereas these events are really about maximizing, either your engagement of top players or your monetization. So in reality, we have to make a content strategy so that the two don't intersect directly. Like usually the content of one doesn't go in the other.
Yeah, it's pretty good. And then one last one for you as well. How do you come up with ideas for constantly new events in your games? And then you've had to name the most impactful timing for the event in a Western game. What would it be? Would it be Christmas? Would it be Halloween? Would it be St. Patrick's Day?
Interesting. So the end of the year, in terms of pure calendar dates, is obviously the most powerful. So Black Friday and Christmas, but it's not. I don't think it's just about the calendar dates. So the calendar dates provide you an excuse to do something, but it's about when you decide to run the top content. If your game has been there for a long time, your players know the value of that content. If you look at a game like Marvel Contest of Champions, they always spike on the 4th of July. That's not necessarily a top date, but they decide that that's when they're going to put top content, and so they go top. And their players know the value of the content that is there, so they follow it. As for the timing, I mean, you need to have something on a constant basis, but let's say usually at least once per quarter, you should try to have a new type of live op in your game. Again, even if this is just a presentation, if it's just something that feels new but isn't directly new, this is important. You need to keep this engagement going. So that should be part of your plan.
Super. All right, man. Well, listen, that's all we got time for today. Thank you so much for your time. Really, really great presentation. Great to see you again, and have a good one.
You too.
Awesome.